in the hopes that it saves the whiteboard, but I don't know. I've attempted to confirm that and then forgot about it a couple times. But yeah, I'll do that real quick, and then so that should be right at the beginning of this video where I go to my whiteboard. And so I'll go back to this video because I don't like rewatching my videos, but so this will be right at the beginning of it, so I should be able to see whether this occurs or not. And if it does, great, but if not, I can save those whiteboards, and then, as you saw, I shared them in the group. Yep.
Great.
What's up, Nita? Good morning. Yes, I heard a voice. What was that? Well, Thursday is the group study, but I've started to call it applied mindfulness. I think that's a fun way to look at the island of the practical, is the application of mindfulness in everyday life. So what I really like is that sometimes you guys can help remind me of the maturation of my practice as I went along, and because of the things that you all are adapting to and navigating as well. So yeah, I look forward to those discussions. Still freestyle, still group study-esque. I just call it applied mindfulness because I think that's an appropriate title for what we're talking about. How does mindfulness apply to our everyday life situation? Everybody can come with questions, comments, or concerns. And then that usually leads into an amazing discussion about how does this actually fit into, interacting with our everyday experience, which is what mindfulness is, right? All right, I am also taking notes, and I had some things reasonably organized, but I finished up a couple classes on Sunday. So, no, I finished them up mostly on Saturday, and then Sunday, Shayna and I kind of just enjoyed Mother's Day. But you can expect PowerPoints at a certain juncture with some of this as well. All right, so before I get started, I just want to show you where you can find some of these things, just because I know websites can be weird sometimes, but I think that my website is, I don't know, it's pretty clean as usual. It's not, too convoluted. I would love to add to a few good words if anybody has some. I mean, I've been using these few good words since 2018, so I don't know if anybody can drop me a dime, a paragraph or whatever. If not, that's cool too. But all right, so yeah, private lessons, you can book all that. But up here now is we have class, and if you click on class, there's of course just this button. So you don't, however you're getting to this room is fine. But if you want, you can hit live class, or you can go to the study button, and then it'll also have the button join live study. Yeah, but study will probably go away because I have it under the class category as applied mindfulness. Let me go back. Oops, that was my book. I don't know why, but I can't click back on class. So I'll go back that way. But you can see we have foundations of mindfulness. That's this. And then we have tomorrow, I'll talk about mindful movement mechanics. And I'll talk about that more. But when we do mindful movement, 4 modes, the 4 modes is delivered in 3 major ways. Informal, formal, which is what we'll talk about a little bit today, is the terms informal, formal. And then you have the assisted and you have a guided. We'll be able to do some guided 4 modes practice. So that's the 3 ways to share the 4 modes practice, is those 3 basic ways. A person can have their own informal, formal. That's their thing. They do that as they see fit. But then we have a guided 4 modes practice. That's going to be me guiding people through it. And then it's a guided meditation. That's the bottom line. Is, when the hands are going over the head, we want to feel into our face, feel into the body as the energy goes down into the earth, type of stuff. If we do that type of thing, you do need a space to lay down. I don't have to see you because I'm not making corrections on how you lay down. But if you wanted to do an assisted or a guided 4 modes practice, there will be sitting and laying down. That's 2 aspects of the 4 modes. Make sense? And then I'm not doing assisted 4 modes yet because I haven't decided how I want to assist in that laying down posture. I'm leaning towards yin yoga, because that's a lot of what I do and Shayna does. And we really get chi moving when we do that. So that's really what I'm looking for. This is movement. And you're about to see a new book, which is my theories of movement. Everything is about movement. The body is moving, the energy is moving, the universe itself is in constant, movement. And so it's really just beneficial to imitate that to a certain extent. Keep moving, but that doesn't always mean that we're using it, because I can be sitting still. My body looks perfectly still, but I'm still moving. There's still movement, and I can still tune into that, if that makes sense. So that's pretty much what all that's going to be about. Any questions about that? So we have, I'll show you on the screen again, just these three things going on. And these are 4-week classes. So if I don't know, if you guys just don't want to do this anymore, then no big deal. We can stop these. So from Foundations of Mindfulness started today. You can see mindful movement starts the 10th. Applied mindfulness starts the 12th. Applied mindfulness runs until August. So, and you don't have to sign up unless you want to. I do like it when you sign up, because that actually just helps my website CEO. The more you go to it, the more clicks I get, the more you do different things inside of my website, the more that boosts it to the top. But if you Google my name, I'm already at the top. But if you Google mindfulness, I'm nowhere near there, of course. Because there's a lot of mindfulness is going to be just like everything else. If in this country, and I don't know, good, bad, I'm not looking at it that way, but it's just like anything else in this country. If there is a financial opportunity, if there's even a cent of financial opportunity, that's blood in the water. And before you know it, we already do, but we'll have a myriad of mindfulness apps and mindfulness teachers and mindfulness classes and mindfulness this and that. And I guess that's great to a certain extent. I'm sure that is inevitable. If there's money to be made, that's the thing. If there's no money to be made, we'll never hear about it. But any questions before we head into some of what I wanted to talk about today? Okay. All right, so first we'll just get into, and you know that we talk about the definition of mindfulness when we talk about the 3 pillars, but we're just gonna, whoops, what did I do? So we're just gonna get started, and I'm just going to give that basic definition of mindfulness. So we'll just start there because, this is a mindfulness class. That's, what we're learning, the foundations of mindfulness. So it helps to just start with a basic definition. And I like using the word ability because ability implies skill to a certain extent. Sometimes people say natural ability, that you're born with that, but it just depends on how you look at it. But I'll put the skill. That's it, right? The skill of paying attention to the moment. We're done there, right? That's the end of my definition, or is there something else to it? Donna, is that the end, that we just need to be present? I think I just gave it away. Dang it. But the skill of paying attention to the moment, is that all that mindfulness is? I mean, essentially, right?
Deliberately.
Deliberately. Okay, sure. We'll talk about what deliberate means, of course. But yes, I like that, to deliberately pay attention to the moment. What else? What else is a part of that definition?
Your body in space, an internal point of attention.
Sure. So I guess that's how we're going to do it, right? Proprioception is our body in space and time. We can pay attention to that. And I'll talk more about that here in a second. We'll get into that. It is managing your mind. And I love the word managing. I really do. Managing is, I just took a management class actually, and I had to redirect a wide variety of word choices because one of the 4 aspects of management is control. And I'm like, oh, here we go. But I get what they're saying. We do need to follow up. We do need to make adjustments. And sometimes you have to change and adapt to things in the midst of it. They use the word control. I would use the word adaptation, stuff like that. But yeah, we're managing the mind. I think that's the gist of what we're doing, Lauren. I agree with that. But I think one of the keys that's often missed with the definition of mindfulness, and a lot of my definition of mindfulness and the way that I talk about it does come from folks like Thich Nhat Hanh, just because Thich to me was the real deal. I often say that there are very few teachers who could show me a mind that had actual space where they weren't thinking all the time. That is Thich Nhat Hanh. I have no reason to believe that he was the world's most elaborate hustler. He would have had to have been a really good liar to get away with something like that. So yeah, I really like Thich Nhat Hanh's definition and the way that they approach mindfulness, but it's the skill of paying attention to the moment without new thought streams. And now, some of these words may seem arbitrary, but without thought streams, and I'm going to put, and I may misspell stuff. So, Gene, if you're taking notes, just spell it correctly. That's all you got to do. Without new thought streams necessarily. Okay. Now, I like the word necessarily because, again, I don't want to get into this erroneous dynamic of the human experience where now all of a sudden we're never thinking, or we're never this or never that, or always this or always that. It's like, oh, here we go again. And we don't need to. We're looking for a comfortable middle and learning to adapt and stay inside a certain circumference, like a certain, I call it the bubble of hydrostasy. But we want to stay not too far in extremes, but we do sometimes teeter-totter, and sometimes we do dip our toes in extreme. And it is what it is, and then we can come back to center, right? So the human experience isn't about just being this or just being that, as far as I can tell. We're far more dynamic than that. So thoughts may occur sometimes, and they could be creative, they could be interesting, they could be new, and we don't have to declare war on it. I would say, though, that even creative thoughts can get out of balance. If all you're doing is thinking creative thoughts all the time, that's going to have a certain feeling. And it's, not going to feel as expansive as it could if you're doing it all the time. Since we're involved in infinity, anything is possible. Yeah, I can't disagree with that statement. And sometimes when things are just, I don't know, or even I don't think so, I still put it on the shelf of possibility. I find that comfortable. If someone says, Ernest, you can walk on water, maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't been able to yet. I'll tell you that. Every time I step in a puddle, my ankles get wet. Like, I don't know what to tell you, but maybe someday, I don't know. You could be right. So I find that's a good way to suspend, and I'm still kind of in the realm of possibility. But then again, I'm not going to try. I'm not going to jump off of a cruise line ship thinking I'm going to walk on water in absolute faith. Any questions so far? So the basic.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes. Perfect.
So are you saying you inserted necessarily in there, and I assume that you're meaning, tell me if I'm wrong, that since we have a habit of being human and we think in terms of words and we think thoughts often, that being mindful, if we are experiencing, paying attention to the moment, it may or may not be, words may or may not be included. Sometimes it's a wordless experience. It's something that we are noticing, observing, paying attention to without sentences in our heads. And other times it may be words like vibrant, peaceful, quiet, sound, pleasant, even judgment words like that. May be something that we notice or choose to observe, yellow, whatever, or it may be without words.
Exactly. Yeah. And ideally, the words will be few and far between. And if we are doing our practice, we'll be able to quickly see when the words are starting to pick up momentum, and we're like, oh no, wait a second. The trees are beautiful. The sun is beautiful. I do love my life. and now I'm back to my practice. You see what I mean? But those words could certainly occur to you, and I wouldn't be like, Ida, did you just think that you're loving your life and it's beautiful? You just violated the mindfulness principle. What are you doing? That doesn't make any sense. So ideally, words will, actually, ideally, it's not that words will occur. We've accumulated that habit, and we're going to work with that dynamic rather than rejecting it and declaring war on it, because I think that would be a type of force and attempting to control. But yeah, and of course, the more that you practice, the less the dialogue is necessary. You already know it's beautiful. You already know it's magical. You've said this to yourself a few times already in life since you've been practicing, and then you don't say that as much probably. So, my practice now, I can go decent lengths of time. I'm not keeping time because I don't see the point in that, but I think it's a pretty decent length of time where I can go without any thought, and I'm connecting, I'm engaging, and I'm observing, and I'm moving and adapting and doing all of those things without words necessarily. But then I see a bug I've never seen before, and then a thought will occur. Well, that's cool, and it's also terrifying because it has a million legs. And then I go about my day. Those words did occur, and I don't think I really violated any principles, right? I think a violation of principle would be getting down on myself because I had a thought that was like, I'm curious, and I'm also a little bit terrified of a bug that has a million legs. It's like, no, you don't need all those. I got two, and I get along just fine. But you need a million. Like, well, of course they don't have a million, but you know what I mean. Those bugs, zillion. I just went from a million to zillion, but a lot of legs. All right. So does that answer your question, Donna? Does that?
It does. It answers my question. I was noticing walking through a busy place and the different people and observing flow and resistance and not judging it because it was just some people appeared that, or it felt like they had lots of resistance going on as they navigated, and other beings looked like they had less resistance, and there were very few that looked like tick, that there was no resistance. But I remember my center point felt like it is what it is, and I've been in any one of those states, so there was not judgment about it. It was just how all these different beings were navigating with different degrees of resistance, struggle, suffering, whatever you wanted to call it, but without judgment of it, how all of us can exist in some state of flow. So yeah, there were words, but there was a lot less judgment of
Sure.
it than usual.
Yeah. And I think the practice, the more we practice, and this kind of skips ahead, of course, because this is just like very foundational, but the more we practice, it's called cognitive attention training. We're aware of our thoughts, and we're not judging, we're not getting down on ourselves when they occur. But if you're watching your thoughts and holding your points of attention, you'll see when it starts to get to a momentum. Like you see, it's like, oh, now I went from necessarily a thought occurring to it's starting to gain some momentum, stream together, link together. And now I'm going off into thought streams. Oh, let's bring it back to the practice. I don't need to go off into thought. So, and that's something, and actually, Lauren, I think that your management word, I think that's what that is. That's what we're doing, is we're learning to manage. Oh, thoughts occurred. It's actually starting to pick up a little bit of momentum, and I don't really want that right now. So I'll go back to everything else that I was doing, maybe even rule of three, because it started to, and that's something that we individually have to be aware of, and that's our individual responsibility at a certain point, is balancing that line of I'm walking in the forest and I just think, this is so beautiful and I'm having a good time. And then now you just, well, why am I not always having a good, and then, why isn't everybody? And then the world would be so much better if and now we're going off into tangents. And now we may be starting to violate some principles, you see.
Right. So that was why the necessarily word is in there, because the practice is about the dynamic movement through mindfulness, and how we navigate with more or less resistance, just noticing the present moment. Sometimes there may be words there, We might be talking ourselves back into practice, or whatever. When we notice it, and sometimes there's words associated with it. But the goal is to be aware of the present moment without new thought streams overtaking us, becoming a reactionary thing.
Yes, I like the way you rounded that out. We don't want it to be a reactionary thing. We don't want to go back into the habit of over analyzing and thinking and dividing when it's not necessary, especially when it's not what we want to do. We didn't go into that forest to unless you did, unless you're a scientist and that's your job is to go catalog and differentiate everything. If that's not your job, I don't know why you would do that. But if I see a new bug, I might be like, is that a carnivorous, something, or is it, and then I don't know, and then so I'll just go about my walk. But if I go into exactly, we go into launching the thought streams and things like that, that can become wildly unbeneficial, and then before you know it, we allowed the thought streams to gain momentum, and we didn't really enjoy our walk because we were thinking about the differentiation of bugs when it wasn't all that important to everything else going on. You see what I mean?
Yes, you're allowing the external circumstances to determine whether you're having a good experience or not a good experience. You're judging it as a good experience and not a good experience instead of being fully present in the moment. Yes, I understand.
Yeah. And I would say the more you practice, the less these necessary thought streams are going to occur when you don't really want them to. And that just comes with practice. With more practice, you just get really, really good at, no, not right now. I don't need the necessarily, so I'm just going to go do my thing. I'm just going to keep multiple points of attention, like a whirlwind in my bubble of perception. And out of the 3 million people, I don't know who's doing what they're doing, what I'm doing with my mind. I don't know. Ultimately, in a room of 10 people, I don't know what any of those 10 are ultimately thinking or seeing or perceiving. But I think that what I'm doing with my mind in a group of people is probably not popular to a certain extent. And that's not good or bad either. It's just another form of acceptance and, moving forward. I'm going to get another cup of coffee and then we'll continue. Okay. So if you have any questions about what we've talked about, if they surface in the meantime, we can just talk about that. So basically what we've been talking about first in this first little bit is just that basic definition of mindfulness. Okay. So I'll be right back. All right, so I'll just ask, like, does that differentiate? Has anybody else heard a different definition of the word mindfulness? What did you think maybe before you started doing this? What are some things floating around out there? I don't know. If
Control
anything.
issue. I think the control issue, controlling your mind, and the misperception of I have to have a positive thought all the time. If I'm not thinking positively, then I'm not being mindful. Mindful is doing good deeds and being positive and not being negative. And I think it was well worth listening to all of your explanation of the mindfulness practice before continuing, even though it did take a little while, because I think it gets wildly misinterpreted. And then how can you start building any communication about it without an understanding of what we're talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I guess I see that positive, and we'll talk about that. There's a place for positive thinking, but that's not in my definition of mindfulness, by no means. Yes, Jean, did you have one?
Yeah, mindfulness prior to the class was a work kind of activity, was a focus kind of activity. It was a narrow focus, and it took energy to tune out lots of things and focus on something. It wasn't necessarily chosen or particular, but it was paying lots of attention to something. But before class, it was more like work. It was more like an activity I needed to perform, and trying to hold it was, I kept on saying to myself, I guess it's not for me, because I can't focus that narrowly for a long time. So let me try something else.
That makes sense. Yeah. And then I'll talk about that formal, Lauren, because that's a big one. And it's going to be huge in what we're doing. So really the two things I wanted to talk about today, just because we're basic mindfulness, we're going to have 4 weeks of this basic foundational stuff is just the definitions of mindfulness, and then formal and informal. And then, that's pretty much it. I think that's if we had never heard any of this, I think this would be a good little bit of information to be like, oh, okay, let me go make some comparisons. I noticed that the word mindful is used very often without any, there's no mechanism for anything. It's just in the corporate world, I started to tune into that word, once I started working at the dispensaries, because they're wildly corporate. But, beyond hello, I remember the first time that area supervisor, be mindful of this, he was throwing that word around like it was, I don't know what, but he was saying that word constantly, and it started to not really make any sense. Like the way that he was using the word, it was just too interchangeable, and I just didn't know what he was talking about. But yeah, so I think sometimes it's not very well defined. There's no real tools, or they're just taking something else and calling it mindfulness. And that's weird. I don't know. It gets really confusing if we don't have a clear definition of what we're doing. So any more questions, or how you've heard the word mindfulness?
Well, I can say that before class, the word mindfulness never really came into my life. I have tried meditation and had wanted to feel peace and calm, but to actually break it down to doing simple things and putting your focus on it, I may have hit on it, and I did many times hit on it accidentally through painting or exercise or something, where I felt that calm, but I would never really have had associated it to putting your focus on something the way I know mindfulness now to be, putting your focus on something, and it cleared my mind automatically whenever I used to paint and things, but I didn't really know what it was. So the word never really meant much to me before class.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And then when we talk about the 3 pillars, which will be coming up, we won't get into that today because it's a little bit down the road in the foundation of things. The 3rd pillar is not represented in the world. I don't see it. I don't see it anywhere. The way that I talk about it, the way that I've learned to navigate and work with the 3rd pillar, it is not represented in the world today. I don't see it anywhere. So if I was doing a SWOT analysis or some sort of, analysis of what we're offering compared to what this is a unique feature, and I'm putting unique in air quotes because it exists somewhere. There's somewhere out of these 7 billion people who are like, I need to be paying attention to something to maintain this. Otherwise, I'm not really doing it, right? Or I very quickly go back into habits because I haven't, rooted into the moment. Yeah, so I can understand, if this idea of paying attention deliberately to a point that we've chosen, that's what helped me cross the divide between theory and application. That's exactly what wasn't being taught to me and represented, which is exactly why I feel a responsibility to leave this behind, because it is something that is very useful, specifically the 3rd pillar. Okay, and we'll get into the pillars. So those are the pillars of mindfulness. Yes, Jean. we're not going to get into it now. So we're just, yeah.
Oh, no, I was going to say that mindfulness and paying attention to a deliberate point, it resembles flow. It has lots of similarities to flow, and I think of the games I play, like perhaps tennis. Tennis is easy. I'm focused on the ball and open spaces, and that's all I'm focused on. Where the people aren't, where are their open spaces, and where do I put the ball? And so there is a very narrow focus. And there are many points of attention, and in flow, when that happens, I'm keeping many points of attention at the same time, and I didn't realize the value of it, except that I wanted to do it again, however I did that. And now with taking class, I begin to realize that it's multiple points of attention without thought. I mean, without necessarily thinking anything except put the ball in an open space,
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
flow brings mindfulness to the fore.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. I like the idea that we're learning to imitate flow, because flow is a type of alignment with everything else around it. That's why it's flowing so well. Now, that doesn't mean that the flow doesn't change directions, it doesn't turn, it doesn't twist, because it does. When you look at smoke, or when you look at air coiling, it's not just coming up in one stiff straight line, no, it's moving, there's currents, so it's all moving, and we're adapting, and we're, the flow state, though, is intention and will with no lag between them. It's just almost instantaneous. The will, or the desire to do something, and then the will to bring it forth is there's very little lag, and that's what the flow state feels like. And that's really what this practice is learning to do. It's learning to take intention and will, and then over time, there's less lag, because we're not fighting ourselves anymore. Our mind isn't at war with itself anymore, so it's able to work together. And it's dynamic, it's synergistic, it's all of those things. Hydrostatic, if that's how we want to look at it. That's how I look at it. All right, any other questions then about the basic definition of mindfulness? We talked a little bit about how some people talk about it, and I think that could be reasonably beneficial for anybody that's watching this back. I've heard mindfulness used in all kinds of weird ways, and so let's talk about the weirdest way to talk about mindfulness. So one of the things about mindfulness is that it's often used with the word meditation, right? Mindfulness is a meditation. That's the bottom line. It is a form of meditation, but meditation can be both. It can be both at the same time. Interesting, but formal and informal. So meditation, if formal, is meditation. Well, and informal is meditation as well. But when meditation becomes informal, we could call that mindfulness. But we'll just talk a little bit about formal and informal, and why it's important, and where we start, because it's a little bit different than where maybe other people start. So formal and informal. Let's just start with formal. Formal mindfulness could be a part of your meditative practice, that's for sure, because you can pay attention and engage the world around you without necessarily new thought streams occurring. If you're doing that, you're mindful of the moment. And if you're doing it in a very, particular way, let's say every day at 3 o'clock, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do my meditation. And I do it at 3 o'clock. I do it in a particular way, sitting down. I say a particular mantra. I'm doing my mindfulness practice at the same time, but it's very formal. So formal, essentially, is at a particular time, at a particular place, with particular people, in a particular way. Is the big deal, is that you're doing it in a particular way. Does that make sense? So if I want to do a formal Tai Chi practice, I would go to class, or I'll block off 30 minutes every single day and it's going to be more structured. That's a good word. Yeah, definitely more structured. Formal is going to be more structured like that. Like maybe you'll put on certain types of clothing, and maybe you'll light some incense and put on some nice music and turn the lights down a little bit and really slip into your comfort zone. Does that make sense? Formal meditation. And it's super duper useful. There's all kinds of ways to learn. You could do Transcendental Meditation. Trademarked. I do not own the rights to that, and I'm not teaching it or recommending it necessarily. Transcendental Meditation, you're just saying a mantra again and 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 again. And that could work. Then again, for some folks, it could work at first, and then they're like, well, what am I doing? This is just mantra, I'm just saying this, and okay. But for other people, they really pick it up, and that's their thing, formal meditation. So what's your experience? Does that fit? Have you ever seen the structure of formal meditation? Did anybody try formal meditation before mindfulness? My experience. Yeah, Gene, go ahead.
Yeah, I would light a candle, and usually in the dark, and stare at the flame and watch it move, and just watch it move. So that was my formal meditation. I'd find a quiet place. It would be dark. I'd light a candle and watch the flame move, the colors, the changes, and that was the total meditation.
Well, there you go. And that's okay too. I've done that before as well. And there's nothing wrong with it. I'm not going to place judgment on that type of activity. I think that's fine. There was one day, though, where I had a really good meditation. I for one reason or another, the world wasn't in a state of calamity. My world, at least, wasn't in any state of calamity. I had a good meditation, felt good. I was like, wait a second, like, I don't feel like this all the time, though. I had a really good Tai Chi session, and and I'm feeling really good. And then 10 minutes later, I'm back thinking these weird thoughts. I'm going away from the feeling, and I'm like, oh, wait a second. Isn't this supposed to have some sort of like residual effect to where my 20 minutes of meditation is just going to make the rest of my day perfection? I mean, what gives? It's not working. Yeah, I've had wildly good formal meditation experiences, so much that I created a term called the retreat effect, because they've been so good that I thought this was gonna it was it. I just learned some shit, and I just felt some stuff, and it's amazing, and my life has changed. Wow, it's never gonna be the same. You know what I learned? I am the whole universe experiencing itself as a human being. My mind blown, my energy blown. We did a chanting meditation as a group, and boy, the energy was really good, and namaste. And then I fly home, and then 1 week, 2 weeks, 2 days, 1 hour, it just really depends. I'm right back in but no, Ernest, you just need to come to 1,000 retreats. You need to come to 1 retreat a month. You just need to download my software or pay for my thing, and then it'll last more. We just need to do it more. We need to join a monastery. We need to travel to Asia. We need to, go off into the mountains and have someone put, frog secretions into our bloodstream, And I'm not saying any of that's bad. I don't know. You want to do? I've had my share of hallucinations, so I wouldn't judge you. That's for sure. But the gist is that it didn't seem to add up to me, like accumulate to anything really to me. And 9 times out of 10, meditation felt difficult. I would sit down, I'd be like, okay, I'm gonna quiet my mind. Well, why am I? And then I'm instantly launching into thought streams. And it's just, no, don't want to think, no thinking. And it's just like, at the end of the meditation, I'm like, boy, I'm fucking tired. I feel terrible. And maybe that's just me. I wasn't doing it right. I don't know. I didn't have a good teacher. Wasn't in a good school. Didn't have a good group. Who knows? I don't know. I think there's probably a lot of meditation groups that are doing beautiful things. They're doing, great stuff. So it's not a declaration of war on meditation, of course. It's just for me, and I'm sure for many other people, meditating, A, felt really difficult. B, sometimes I felt like I didn't know what the hell I was doing or why I was doing it. And C, even when it did feel good, it didn't last. It didn't accumulate, it didn't add up. It didn't feel like it didn't have that residual effect that people are telling me that, oh, but no, Chris, you just have to do it for 40 years. That's the thing. If you do it for 40 years, then you can have a good 5 or 6 years at the end of your life where you just chill. You're happy. And I'm like, oh, that's all, just 40 years? Okay. 10,000 hours minimum of practice?
I
Okay.
had a little bit in different experience. I feel less animosity than I hear in your voice and my brother's voice when he talks about that kind of stuff. But it's not because the expectation was unrealistic. I felt some really powerful things in different forms of formal practices. And there was some residual effect, but my struggle wasn't, yes, it didn't last. And it was how to bring those experiences into my everyday life. And what I found was if I was successful in staying in the space of the virtues that I gained of the experience, I was not able to perform in regular society very well because I was trying to live in a state that I was far from the way the rest of the planet was living, and I didn't know how to make those two ends meet. So I would drop it completely in order to go back to my regular life. And so I felt there was a real split in what I was doing with my formal practice or socially or how I was choosing to spend my time, because I preferred that state of mind and that feeling of being with people who understood what I was trying to achieve, and what they were trying to achieve, a peaceful, tranquil, meditative space. And then it got complicated. Yes, you want to, travel and out of body travel and all that kind of stuff, which I was open to all of that. But how does that translate to living my everyday life? I had to go to work every day. I performed as a nurse every day. I had to drive a vehicle every day. I had to manage my finances every day. And how did any of those two things go together? So it became a struggle for me. I ended up either resenting the fact that I didn't have enough time to be in my meditative space and my mindfulness space. It did help me with my everyday life. I was calmer. I was more patient, but it wasn't real. I didn't have a practice in my everyday life. I dropped the practice unless it was formal. And I ended up resenting my everyday life because it wasn't as peaceful and connected as I felt in my meditative formal practices. So that was my experience with not being able to carry formal meditation into my everyday.
Yeah, that makes sense. So being able to carry it into your everyday life, I wasn't seeing either. And then I started to see some shit that made me really concerned. I went to a meditative group thing, and we had to bow before we entered the floor. And then we had to take off our shoes. We had to be silent. And I'm like, what am I doing? I don't want to be here. I don't want to do any of this. I don't like it. So I ran. I didn't walk. I got the hell out of there. I mean, it just wasn't my thing. I make a great student. If Gene wants to teach me something, give me books, give me drills, give me things I can do. The moment he says he wants me to be his disciple, I'm out. Sorry, not sorry, but I mean, I'm willing to learn, but I'm not willing to do that. 1 second. Okay. All right, so let's get into the informal part, and then any final questions, comments, or concerns, the definition of mindfulness and the definition of formal and informal, because this goes into the definition of mindfulness. So once upon a time, I was doing some Tai Chi, and this would be at the movie theater because I was just starting to learn. I found my Tai Chi teacher while working at the movie theater. right? Because he later announced to me that he bought a barbecue restaurant. And I'm like, oh, well, what do you know about barbecue? Nothing. What do you know about business in America? Nothing. And I'm like, oh shit, he's in trouble. So, but at the movie theater, I was starting to put some of these things together. And I was like, wow, like, why can't I take some of these elements that we're talking about? And why can't I just take them with me throughout the day? I'm going to go refill my coffee. Give me just 1 second, okay? Sorry. I got to get it before Shana does. I'll be right back. All right, so now let's get into the last little piece of this, and that is informal. So I was like, well, what happens if I take this little meditative thing that they gave me and I do it throughout the day? So one of those was mantras. And because I was learning transcendental meditation, I was learning, oh God, there's all these, difficult word meditations, and I don't care about most of them, but I don't. They're not a part of my experience much anymore. But there were all these different word meditations that I was doing and all these different things. And I was like, they have some consistencies between them. They all want me to place my focus on something. My attention needs to go on something. And I still hadn't put it together fully yet. I hadn't put the third pillar together yet. But I was just, starting to get to the tip of that iceberg. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to see what happens. I'm just going to see what happens when I start taking some of these elements from Tai Chi that they're teaching me, from the meditation that they're teaching me. What if I just start doing it like throughout the day? And then, of course, I was introduced to the term mindfulness. And then people like Tick, people like Eckhart Tolle, they really helped me understand that I can embody this. And we'll talk about embodiment later, but that I can take a formal meditation and informally take it with me. The moment we take the principles of meditation informally, it's going to look a lot like mindfulness, the way that we've defined it. So informal practice is taking elements of the meditative practice, you could say, to create the meditative state, you could say, but you're taking it with you all throughout the day. In everything that you do, you're looking to take some of these elements of meditation with you. Now, you can take the elements of transcendental meditation, the mantra, with you throughout the day. Again, I don't know. I have this limited, unlimited. If I'm just saying the same phrase over and over and over and over again, I tried that. I had a Buddha beads. I still have them in my drawer, and there's like 100 little beads, and I would touch each one and say the mantra. That's what Long was teaching me. And it worked for a little while until I realized that I was touching the beads and saying the words and still doing and thinking all of the other stuff, because it became a habit. I'm just touching beads, and that's just habitual because I wasn't really engaging it. So an informal practice, I have proven, at least to myself, and I think that this group, eventually maybe you will report back your results, but I feel like embodying and really focusing on the informal practice has made the formal not only approachable, but desirable. And we'll talk about that much later with behavioral change and things like that. But because I take it with me all the time and I'm always doing it, if I sit down, I just keep doing it. It's not like I need to do anything as I have to shift myself into this frame of mind to meditate, because no, I've been meditating all day. And I was talking to my friend named Roger, who works at Chen Chen, and he teaches something called the Traeger approach. And I can dig it. I'm starting to like Milton Traeger more and more. Some things I'm like, oh, but some things I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. But he said that he was watching an interview with Thich Nhat Hanh with Oprah. And Oprah says, well, how often do you meditate? And he's like, I'm meditating right now. And I didn't see that episode of Oprah. Otherwise, that would have helped something click for me. I would have been like, he's doing it right now. So there was a certain point for me when it really started to click that I don't need to necessarily light the candles and turn on the nice music and turn the ambiance down and make sure that I have 30 minutes of quiet time reserved. I can start to take all of these elements with me throughout the day. And that really helped me understand the power of informal meditation, mindfulness. So another way to look at mindfulness is informal meditation. And informal meditation, just like formal meditation, will help create what some people have called the meditative state. I would say that the meditative state is you're inside of that bubble of hydrostasy that I've talked about, the bubble of perception. Emotionally, you're not too far in any extreme because you're inside of this bubble. And that bubble, the closer to center, feels more and more like the meditative state of peace, of relaxation. I'm not going to say no mind, because my mind is more than just thinking. So there's a lot of stuff going on. It's just happening more efficiently, more effectively. It benefits me and other people a whole lot more because I've changed the way that I'm interacting with it all. So one way to look at the definition of mindfulness is the skill, the ability to pay attention to the moment without necessarily creating new thought streams about it. But it's also meditation. It's informal meditation that we learn to take with us all throughout the day. Does that make sense? And so it does, I'm getting better at this. I am earnest. So sometimes when I see something, I have to rule of three. I have to, oh, no. But so many times I see the word mindfulness, and what are they doing? They're in a seated meditative posture, doing a seated meditation. And then they call it mindfulness meditation. And I get it. Like, you are mindfully meditating. I get that. But they're using it so interchangeably, and this is going to occur. Because when runaway capitalism sees the blood in the water of potential profit, they're going to just go all over it. And if 900 minds want something easy, something quick, something, cheap in a manner of speaking, not a lot of substance, they're going to give that. They're going to provide that because 900 people want it. So they're going to give the people what they want, first of all, because that's what sells. You can't sell what people don't want. And so capitalism isn't going to jump all over that. So before you know it, you're going to see these words used even more interchangeably. You're going to see them used in ways that just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And it's because the people that are doing it, the people that are creating it in general, they're doing it for profit. And there are some who are not. There are some who are just dedicated to sharing. They're dedicated to making their services available, and that's fine. There's a lot of different things in this world occurring. And I don't know if there's more than one or the other. I don't know, because I only live in this little bubble of perception. I don't get to see the whole thing. But I think that we can expect this to occur more because mindfulness is going to be associated with mental health, as it should be. Mental health is becoming more and more and more and more important. But I think people still grossly misunderstand mental health. If Gene has just gone overboard and he's bashing his head up against the wall, we'll be like, oh, he has a mental health issue. But if Donna is angry and she's just like furious and, she's whatever, oh, that's just human. She's just angry. She's just ready to kill somebody. She's just furious, vengeful. That's just being human. Fine, just don't do it. You don't really kill anybody, but you can think about it all you want to. So one is accepted, but that's not a mental health issue, Donna. Constantly being mad and wanting to fight and you're angry, and that's still a little bit of counseling, and it's not, whatever. So the way that the world looks at mental health is very flimsy. It's not consistent. So when I see somebody that is, and it's not a judgment thing. So I don't go into long thought streams, but I can see when somebody is struggling with a mental health issue. Somebody who's constantly anxious, they're struggling with a mental health issue. If they're constantly depressed, or if they're going back and forth between them, they don't feel well. It is a wellness issue. It is it's the same thing occurring. So I would say that mental health is just perfect, Gene. I'm out of balance. I'm not in, and yes, balance is relative to the individual. You know when you're out of balance if you pay attention. I can help you identify that. Not going to tell it for you. You know, you're the one on the surfboard, not me. Well, I'm on my own surfboard. So, but I can look at you, see you going like this, and I'm like, Gene, probably not too balanced, buddy. And then I see Donna on her surfboard, and she's just, you know, really doing them. I can see the balance. You know, I don't have to go into long thought streams about it. So discernment does not require thought, is what I'm saying, and judgment does, is the way that I'm using the word. All right, so mindfulness is the ability to pay attention to the present moment without necessarily new thought streams occurring. It is a skill. We must practice. If you stop practicing, the skill starts to wither a little bit. It starts to decay a little bit. It is like riding a bicycle, so we'll never forget how, but if you don't ride a bicycle for 10 years, you're probably not going to be as good at popping wheelies and, you know, doing all the different things that maybe you could do when you were doing it every day for 5 or 10 years. Right? So mindfulness is an accumulated skill. If we embody mindfulness, we accumulate a lot of skill, and it starts to get easier. I'm sure that what we're doing is easier now than the very first day that you started it. To some extent, I'm assuming. And another way to look at mindfulness is meditation taken with you throughout the day. And meditation, still, that can be a weird word, because there's a lot of different ways to do this. You know, some people are focusing on sexual energy when, okay, that could be fine. That could be a thing that you do, but I don't recommend taking that with you all throughout the day and embodying that. You see what I mean? So I'm taking very basic aspects of meditation, such as paying attention to the moment, breathing, paying attention to my body without necessarily new thought streams occurring. Does that make sense? So it is a mindful meditation. That's the way that I meditate. But embodying mindfulness is very different than, you know, just engaging in these meditative practices every now and then. All right, any questions about any of that? So we're starting to build the foundation of this embodied mindfulness practice. And the reason I call it foundation is because it's not a step, it's not a level. It's a layer. It's the first layer. It's fundamental. And without that layer, I can't put layers above it or over it. And once I have the other layers, I can't remove it. I can't just take it out and expect nothing to change. So the way that this system works is we keep adding layers. We just keep adding layers, and we can always go and revert back to any layer that we want at any time. There's no shame in rule of three, because I will do it today. I did it yesterday. I will do it tomorrow, because my mind is a full-time job, and it does require the rule of three sometimes. You know, I see transcendental or not transcendental, that's fine, but I see somebody saying mindfulness, you know, you need to practice mindfulness, or I go to a website and it's a mindfulness website, and all I do is see people meditating in a seated posture with little stones and flowing rivers, and that is great. I love stones, I love flowing rivers, I love all of those things. I have none of them in Chicago right now, you know, in my daily commute, in my work, things like that. I'm not just sitting. Actually, Shen, now that I think about it, I do put like flowing river music on and stuff like that, and we have like little wind chimes out. Okay, so that is maybe an exception, but I put myself there. All right, any questions, comments, or concerns? Where can I take this in the next 10 or 15 minutes? Otherwise, that's all I got. But any experiences or anything like that that would relate to this information, mindfulness versus meditation? Yes, Ida, go ahead.
I was going to say, when you mentioned layering, that's very useful to know in the beginning, because I just expected to get something someday all in one. It's probably enlightenment, but I expected to get something by sitting down and trying to meditate, or just kept thinking I was doing the wrong thing or not enough of the right thing, and all those things. But to know that you can add wee pieces to your life as you go along that suit you and your environment, and you can adapt them to your lifestyle, that becomes uniquely your own mindfulness meditation. That is completely, obviously I've said unique. It is unique. And the layering aspect of that, I think, is very useful, to know that you don't have to do everything all at once, that it is incremental and accumulating, and small practices every day add up to something big.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're working with principle there. That's the accumulation principle. It'll all continue to accumulate as long as there isn't that leaking power. And we'll talk about that, of course. But yes, Gene.
I like the idea of focusing and layering. The world that we live in has many activities going on, and it's distracting. It's actually distracting because we put our attention here and there and try to keep it everywhere at the same time, never really paying attention to any of it, just dealing with each individual event with the noise of all the other events occurring as well. So I see the carrying meditation with you is really a simplification of quieting down all the noise. Pick one thing and pay attention to it, rather than listening to all the noise. It's simpler. It's much simpler. I mean, in concept, it's much simpler to focus on one thing and disregard the noise.
For sure. Like if you want to make a toothpaste selection, you walk to the aisle and then literally aisle 9 is all toothpaste. And it's like, there are literally 1,000 different toothpaste options here. Like, how do I know which one's the right one? How do I know which one's going to taste good? How do I know which one's going to have the right amount of whitening but no fluoride? It's like, how do I even begin? So I feel like it's that way also sometimes with wellness. There's just so much out there. It's oversaturating to a certain extent. It's like, where do I start? Do I start doing this, or do I need to go off into the mountains and pretend to be a monk for a few months? What do I need to do? Do I need ayahuasca? Do I need, frog juice injected into my veins? Secretions, what is going to be the thing that, brings me to that enlightenment? And yeah, I make a terrible salesman because this isn't, something that can just be neatly placed for sale, that type of thing. It doesn't have that capitalistic edge to it for a reason, because for a really specific reason. But layering is super important. So there's so many times that I see something that they claim in principle, but then they violate it. They violate it in the way that they behave themselves in like their business practices or the way that they do things. All right, see you, Ida. We're almost done here. So using force, and then in one sentence talking about how we don't use force, we don't try to control, but then some of the things that we do, we're just going to implement that, or we go into a class and like, gee, you must take off your shoes. Always take off your shoes. You can never have shoes, never enter your house with shoes, always take your shoes off, or always bow, or always do this, or always do that, or never speak unless you have first properly introduced. And it's like, maybe. Kindness to ourselves, we can't get it wrong. Maybe, yeah. But some of the ways that we that I've put this together, that we put this together, it eliminates some of these violations of principle. No real, yes, I have some things to teach, but you guys know as well as anybody that I pull myself down from any potential pedestal. Like I take the pedestal and I burn that shit because there's no such thing. Tomorrow I could have something that I need to adapt to that requires a full day of rule of three. And that's foundational practices, folks. So, I'm not leveled up. I just don't view things that way. I don't want anything easy. Don't give me a pill, because what do I do when I don't have your pills? What are the side effects of your pills? I'm using that, nothing against pills. I'm just, that's a analogy, I guess. I don't want to enter the mythical land of enlightenment, because then how do I watch baseball games? How do I go golf? Where is the golf on the monks' grounds or whatever, the monastery? The monks don't golf, or this. Well, why? What's wrong with golf? Or some do. I'm sure there's some monks golfing now, but all right, yeah. So I think that's very beneficial. The layers, super important. Not having a figurehead of perfection, super important. These things are all really important to this practice, and specifically how I put it together, because I never want to slip into those. I view them as almost crimes of, trying to control and manipulate other people through things that they offer. I'll be damned, I'm not going to do that. I would rather just not do anything than do that, because I'm happy. Like I don't need to, like, I'm good. So, I don't need to do anything else to make myself feel more fulfilled. This practice allows for that in the moment without trying to control, manipulate, or necessarily do anything. All right, so that's all I got. Any other questions? Mindfulness, informal, formal. I do like kindness to ourselves, Jerry. I think that that's really important, because the number one form of judgment is judging yourself. And then I was noticing this just for statistical purposes, but walking through Chicago yesterday, I made note of every time somebody was talking about somebody else. Almost always. Almost every conversation was about another person. So, and that's fine. That's what they're doing. I'm not going to spend my life talking about other people, and thinking about other people all the time. They're not thinking about me, and even if they are, I don't care. I'm not going to do that. Out of the 1,440 minutes in my day, I'm not going to spend the vast majority of that with my mind on other people and what they're doing and what they're saying and how they're doing it. So, I mean, yeah, it is the way it is. And sometimes I don't fit in, because if this whole group wants to talk about people, I'm going to be the only one that's not. I might do some, okay, yeah, while I'm backing up. And then slowly Ernest is disappearing because I'm just not interested in it. I don't want to talk about other people. Everything you're saying may be completely accurate, and I don't benefit from rehashing it with you. Self-deprecation and others, yeah, they do go together. Yeah, the attachment to the construct of self leads to the construct and the attachment to the construct of other. And before you know it, people get so attached to their construct of self that they're willing to tell you how to live and what you should do. And religion looks a lot like that sometimes. I can get down with religion as long as it's what you believe, and I'm good with that. If Gene is just starts telling me all the religious things he believes, that's great. I will not think a judgment thought about all the things Gene believes. Why would I? How does that benefit me? How does that benefit Gene? The constant comparison to my own mind is a form of microaggression, and I'm not interested in it. But the moment, yes. No, go ahead.
And contrastly, I find that for myself, I don't know if this is true of you or anyone else, but I find that when I am mindful of the self-deprecation dialogue, and sometimes it may seem innocent, calling myself stupid when I make a mistake, or, words like stupid and idiot and like, wow, I would never say those words to another person. Well, maybe my brother, but not me, not other people, other than, people I love. When I find that I'm mindful of those words, and I hear how harsh they sound toward myself. I am much less judgmental of others and kinder to others. So I find they go together for me anyway.
Well, they do, because once you stop judging yourself and you're not focusing on yourself as much, you very likely won't focus on the construct of other either, because you're doing something to not focus on the construct of self. So that will lend naturally to not focusing as much on the construct of other. Why? Because my focus is too busy paying attention to 3 multiple points of attention while smooth breathing and engaging the present moment. Mindfulness. That's it. I'm too busy doing this that I just don't have a lot of extra time, energy, or mental focus to also think dumb shit about what somebody's doing or not doing or should be doing or shouldn't be doing.
It's
Just don't have time.
huge. It's really a huge shift, because when the
It
shift
is.
happens, there is so much more space in my present moment. There's so much more space for me to engage the present moment, because that just the inner dialogue and the othering takes up so much brain space, so much energy space. It's amazing.
Yeah, and I like the word space. So I like creating mind space, because that's really, I'm not really attaching to that too much. But all right, so real quick before we go, again, if you're navigating my website, this is just how you come to classes now. You just hit class, and these are the 3 classes, and the first 2 are just 4 weeks. So I'll have something different than foundational mindfulness after these 4 weeks. And you can click on it and you can see the dates. You can see when oh, why is it in Eastern time? I don't know. Oh, maybe, oh no, it says Central Daylight Time. I need to fix that then. It says time zone, Central Daylight Time, but it says 5 a.m. Okay, so there we go. I'll fix that. The foundation of mindfulness class is at 6. They're all at 6. But yeah, so I'll get this fixed, but you'll be able to see the time and everything like that. So you can click on those. If you want to book it, you can, even though it says this course can no longer be booked, but I think I know what that is. I'm working out all these little issues here, but so just bear with me. But I'm not going to be using a bunch of different websites. I'm no longer interested in all that. This is going to be and it has been for a while, so I haven't been jumping around to all of these different websites much. I did use one for a little while because it had the bookings option, so I was just like, I'll use it for now. It's about to expire, so I'm just back to this one. But you can, on the home page, you can navigate books as they come out. Zen and the Art of Cannabis is going to be a good one. I'm also going to have a book on my fundamental theories. That way, if space junk falls from the sky, some of my fundamental theories and principles will already be established into the ether in a very clear and understandable way. So that's going to be coming soon. I'm not going to do the next conversation with soul for a little while, because I want people to really absorb this one. The voice of power is essential to the practice, but we'll talk more about that. But yeah, so study is going to go away because that's a part of the classes. So the class that we're in on Thursday is called Applied Mindfulness. That way we can work in more principles. I can give more personal examples in the. So if in Applied Mindfulness, nobody has any questions, comments, or concerns, I'm happy just to share some of my practice. I can share it from the past if you have questions, and I can share some of the things I'm doing now. What are some of the things I need to redirect? What are some of the areas of my spider's web that aren't as, elegant, that are becoming more elegant because of my mindfulness practice? And then in one-on-ones, I can talk about hydrostasy, which starts to get into behavioral change and ways that we can use our mindfulness practice to help. You're not really, and I say behavioral change because that's, going to be a common term in psychology and things like that. But your behavior is always changing. Sorry for, people that don't see this. Just like people who get mad that we're doing or that don't want to do imagination technique. And it's like, well, that's all for the recording, but